John McMullen's got a new story up right now on our website, 97.3 ESPN. The title of that story is Deshawn Knows His Audience. Desean Jackson, he is talking about, knows his audience. You just heard the audio from Damian Musiani during South Jersey Sports Center. We'll play it with you one more time. Here you go.
It definitely is a great story. And then, I guess you can say, starting your career somewhere and all this, be going to a division rival team and, having the possibility of maybe going back. You just kind of think about all that, what you started somewhere and maybe would want to finish it. There's just a lot of speculations of a lot of, thoughts. And it all sounds good, but you really never know until, the final decision is made.
So he's kind of saying, it sounds like it would be a great story to kind of go back to where I began, John McMullen. You write that he's just playing to his audience, though.
Yeah, Deshaun's getting smarter in his old age because,
the wily old Deshawn Jackson.
The wily old veteran. He knows the game now, and he's playing it up, and he realized there's this undercurrent in the fan base that wants him back in Philadelphia. And, hey, if you're in free agency or you're pending to be in free agency starting on March 9th, the best thing to do, obviously, is to increase your value any way possible. And I think that's what Deshawn Jackson was doing on Adam Schefter's podcast. And by the way, I don't have any problem with it. I think it's the proper thing you should do, try to increase your value as much as possible. And he said all the right things. But I still think the Eagles would look in different directions, at least at the beginning of the process. That's not to say they won't entertain it, but I don't think it's plan A. And I still don't think it's plan A.
A great story, John, but is it a Philadelphia story, with all apologies to Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant? John McMullen with us. So if Jackson's a one-trick pony, if that's what people say, all he does is bring speed, who are other people out there?
Trick, though.
Who are the? Yeah, it is a good trick. Who are the other people out there that could stretch the field that aren't named Deshawn Jackson?
Well, there is nobody unless maybe Randy Moss starts playing again, because he's the best deep threat this league has seen since Randy Moss. And he continues to do that. If you look at his two of the 3 seasons in Washington, he caught 56 balls. And that doesn't sound all that good until you look at the next column over, and they're both 1,000-yard seasons. That tells you how productive and how far he gets down the field, basically averaging 17 yards a catch. And that's something the Eagles haven't enjoyed since 2013. And there's a reason for that, because that was the last year he was here.
Yeah.
That's
at the end of the year, John. Isn't that what you want to see from Deshaun? You want to see a guy with 56 catches. He's not a 80, 90 catch guy. That's never what. That's always kind of
interesting. He was under Chip Kelly in 2013. I think he caught 83 balls, and he had his career season. And that's what made the thing so strange to begin with, because he played at such a high level. He made the Pro Bowl, obviously, a Pro Bowl level season, and Chip just went in a different direction and didn't get anything for him, which was the most egregious part of the whole thing. When you have a player at that type of level, and remember, he's still a 26-year-old guy at that time, 27 years old. He's still in the prime of his career. So it was strange, and we all know the rumors and the off-the-field stuff sort of took on a life of its own. But he was that type of guy. I think you're right. He's no longer somebody who's going to catch the football 80-plus times. And the Eagles would love to have a guy who can catch it 56 times for 1,000 yards. And a lot of teams would. And by the way, guys, I think if he did that, I think all of a sudden Jordan Matthews explodes into an 85, 90 catch, very productive guy.
Yeah, and one of the things I was kind of making the point of when he was here with the Eagles, making the money that he was asking for, that he wanted. I'd always said, look, he's not a number one receiver. He's a number one playmaker. And when you say playmaker, that's a guy who is only going to catch the ball about 50, 60 times, but they're going to be big plays. You can't expect 2, 3, 4 big plays in every single game. They come in spots throughout the course of a season, and that's kind of who Deshawn Jackson is and maybe was in Philly, save for that 1 year with him. Let me ask you this question about Deshawn. Because you can connect the dots. They're there. He has talked. People have made references, whatever. But can we squash it monetarily? Can the Eagles afford Deshawn Jackson?
Yeah, they can afford him. They can afford anybody they want, as I said. Now, if you start talking about three or four different players in free agency, no, they can't do that. But if they look at one player and say, this is the guy, and this is the one we're going to target and go after, they could basically bring in anybody they wanted once they complete some of the other off-season things. They still have till March 9th. They're still going to rework contracts. They're still going to release certain players. So they're going to have plenty of money to go after a Deshawn Jackson if they want to. The concern is, obviously, he's now on the wrong end of that demarcation line of 30. He's over that. And if you look at the type of player he is, it's concerning because, obviously, the strength of his game is speed. It remains speed. It was speed last year. And then if you fast forward, you're going to have to sign him for 3 years perhaps. All of a sudden, you really want Deshawn Jackson at 33? Is that same speed going to be there? Mm-hmm. That's unlikely. And that's where you kind of look at the well-roundedness of the receiver. Is this a guy who projects to grow older gracefully? I do not think he projects as that type of receiver, whereas his teammate down there, Pierre Garçon, who's also a free agent, on the other hand, does. So as you mentioned, Mike, it's a different type of receiver, and he's based solely on speed. And how does that project moving forward?
John, were you surprised? He had a great bit in there about his answer about whether he'd lost a step or not, where Tyreek Hill, Deshawn Jackson was right behind him. He told Adam Schefter, he said, I'm right behind him with this chip they put on in terms of speed. That you say the wrong side of 30, and yet clearly at 30, he seems just as fast as he was when he broke into the league.
Yeah, and that's fair because he was. And he did have the second fastest play in the NFL measured this season. So he looks at it and he says he hasn't lost a step, and maybe that's true. But that's where I say you got to project down the line. We're not talking just about next season. It's going to be significant money because there aren't a ton of high-level receivers on the open market. So you have to believe there's going to be competition. And all of a sudden, if you have to backload this deal for salary cap purposes, do you really want to be spending millions of dollars for Deshawn Jackson at 33 or 34? Maybe you do. Maybe he doesn't lose that speed, but maybe you don't.
I guess the money is the big thing. Like, okay, so we cleared that the Eagles can afford him, but how much is he going to be asking for? If he's willing to come here at a secondary price, then his skill set seems worth it. But if he wants to come and be a number one paid receiver at this stage, it probably doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree
My
with
opinion,
you. Deshaun
anyway.
Jackson saying, I love Philadelphia so much that I'm going to give the Eagles a hometown discount. I'm going to play for $7 million. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. Of course you bring him in. That's not the case. He's going to go like most NFL players do, and certainly one that projects to be on his last big money contract. He's going to be offered significant amounts of money, and you're going to have to pay significant money to get him. We can argue what that figure will be, but that's the issue. Because if it's Deshaun Jackson at 26 or Deshaun Jackson at 27, I don't think you bat an eye if you're the Eagles. Yeah, you would want him.
John,
but that's not the case.
Story comes out today that Kirk Cousins reportedly won't sign a new contract before the franchise tag deadline. What impact, if any, does Kirk Cousins' decision have on Deshaun's decision?
Well, Deshaun, he was playing both ends in that interview because he also said, obviously not played up as much in Philadelphia, he also said he'd love to be back in Washington and gushed about how great Kirk Cousins was as a quarterback. He did the same with Carson Wentz. So, as I said, he knows his audience. He knows he's playing off two teams in the same division against each other and potentially other suitors outside. But Kirk's going to be there. That's just a matter of the Redskins. Unfortunately, they put themselves in a hole by making a mistake last season and hedging their bets on Kirk Cousins for putting the franchise tag on him, which was $19.9 million. Now, because they did that last year, they have to pay him nearly $24 million to guarantee he'll be back this season, and they're going to have to do it. And he says he's not going to sign before March 9th, so they're going to put the tag on him. They're going to guarantee him $24 million this season and hope to work out a long-term deal.
Well, let's listen to and he talks about Kirk Cousins. Let's play this bite from Deshaun Jackson.
Carson Wentz, he came in and had a heck of a year as a rookie. I mean, I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. You had Sam Bradford that was there that ended up getting traded to Minnesota. So, he didn't have no choice but to step up and be that guy. But, I mean, that was a gutsy call for the organization to really believe in a young guy like that just came out of college and, give him that shot. And I think, he killed it. He did lights out. He had a heck of a year. So, definitely showed me he can do it. And, he has all the intangibles on being a big-time quarterback in this league.
So is Carson Wentz an attractive piece for an incoming free agent wideout?
Yeah, I think he is. And I think he played it out. I mean, if you're looking next season in the short term, probably Kirk Cousins is going to get you better numbers than Carson Wentz. But as far as long-term ceiling-wise, Carson's is probably higher if everything goes in a positive direction. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think he'd have a problem playing with either of those quarterbacks. It's not like a Cleveland situation or anything of that nature. So I don't think the quarterbacks are much of an issue here for either city. I think he'd be fine with either.
John McMullen's with us, 97.3 ESPN.com. You can read more of John's thoughts on Deshaun Jackson's sit-down with Adam Schefter, who, he made some instances there that a return to Philly would be a great story. In the end, John, would it be a great story? Would it be a good story for Philadelphia? Is this the time? Is this the right place in time to bring Deshaun Jackson back, or should the Eagles not even be thinking about a reunion?
Well, no, I think they should be thinking about it because they need that position so badly to begin with, and they certainly need his skill set more than any other. As far as being able to stretch the field. So I think they should be thinking about it. But as I said, I don't think it should be plan A. I think it should be down on the list. If you can't work out other things, if you can't draft a receiver, if you can't get a Mike Williams, if you can't get a Kenny Stills, maybe you go in a different direction and you bring in an older player. While I say that, though, the way the NFL is going, guys, we always talk about long-term. Because of the safety issues in this league, I think you're going to have to go more towards a college philosophy. And Deshaun spoke in the interview about playing 3 or 4 more years. If he can play 3 or 4 more years at a high level, you take that and you're very, very happy with it, even with a young quarterback. So I do think you have to entertain it. However, as I said, I think there are other avenues to sort of unearth first.
John, there's been some reports that Connor Barwin might have some interest. Trades are tough to make in the NFL, but is there a deal to be made with Connor Barwin?
You never say never with Howie, and you see Jacksonville just worked out a trade for Julius Thomas and Miami. It was actually two different trades, sending Brandon Albert to Jacksonville. We'll see. They can't be made official till March 9th, so anything can happen. You never say never in this league. He makes an awful lot of money. If somebody is willing to pay that contract, to me, it would be a 3-4 team, and they would move him back to outside linebacker where he's played very well in the past. I just think he's ill-suited for being a 4-3 weak side defensive end. That's not what he does. So I do think there could be some interest. However, the crutch to that and the other part of it is the fact that because he makes so much money, then you have to start talking about reworking contracts potentially, and you're not going to get much. I mean, it might be a conditional 6th or 7th round pick. It certainly wouldn't be anything of significance.
You think it's hard to see Barwin back with the Eagles in some capacity? I mean, is he a guy who's either traded or a cap casualty?
Yeah, I do. And it's unfortunate because I know the organization loves him from an off-the-field standpoint and what he's meant to the city.
And the city loves him.
Philadelphia. The city loves him. He loves it here. And it's almost like they wish they could find a place for him to fit in. But if you're going to play this defense, and they're going to play this defense, he's just not a fit for it. And you got to make difficult decisions, and I think that's going to be one of them, and the Eagles will make it soon.
Any news, John, on Benny Logan?
Yeah, Benny's going to be really, really difficult to bring back because I think he's going to get a lot of interest in the open market. You know, Joe Banner's always on Twitter these days, and the ex-Eagles president, and he criticizes agents for re-signing before free agency begins because as the salary cap goes up, there's so much money out there that players like Benny Logan, he's a perfect example. He's not a great player, but he's a good player. And if he's smart enough to get the free agency, if he's smart enough not to sign an extension, and the Eagles would love to get him with an extension, he's going to make a ton of money. I think he knows that. I think his agent knows that. And if he does get the free agency, I just don't think the Eagles can allocate that kind of money at that position because they've already had so much invested with Fletcher Cox.
Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN, NFL News and Notes with John McMullen. You can check out John at JF McMullen on Twitter. Follow him over there, and you can get all of his national columns over at FanRag Sports NFL. As he writes at 97.3 ESPN, Deshawn knows his audience, and you can read that right now. And one thing you wrote about nationally, John, is former Eagles offensive coordinator Pat Shurmur, who is now out as that same position in Minnesota. He's had quite a journey, but could stabilize that offense finally out there. You know, finally getting an offseason. Him and Bradford, who have now been together, going to be 3 seasons. This is the most stability that Bradford's ever had.
Yeah, and we keep pushing that back. We'll see with Sam if next season he can make the playoffs or at least get to 500 as a starting quarterback. And he, you know, for all my criticism of Sam over the years, he played very, very well in a really, really difficult situation last season in Minnesota. But last season when Pat Shurmur got elevated in November, when Norv Turner was kind of retired but really forced out, he was really putting out fires more than anything else because Sam was acquired 8 days before the start of the regular season. Adrian Peterson barely played. They had so many injuries on the offensive line. They lost 4 different offensive tackles, and they couldn't even pass protect. So he did a really good job, Pat Shurmur, of completely changing that offense, going to a lot of 3-step drops, a lot of quick throws. It wasn't good by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't know, and you can look at the guy he replaced. I don't know how many people could have taken over that situation and kept their head above water. Norv Turner was not able to do it. Pat was. So I think the fact that, in theory, that team's going to rebuild the offensive line, you have to believe they're not going to suffer the same kind of injuries. They'll probably move on from Adrian Peterson, which is, believe it or not, a good thing. I think there's no more excuses. We've said that a couple times with Sam Bradford. This is the year.
This is the end.
This is really pushing it off. We can't keep pushing it off. This is the year. He's got to sink or swim.
Right. In the immortal words of Jim Morrison, this is the end.
Beautiful, Fred. The end.
Latavius Murray.
Wait, who's got the blue bus?
Yeah, a lot of people speculating because of agents there. Is he a guy? Agents with Carson Wentz. They were working out together. Is he a guy that you like for Philly? Is he a fit?
Yeah, he's a fit. I didn't make much out of that photo. I wrote about that at FanRag NFL as well. And you're right, Mike. They have the same agent. That's the reason. They were sort of working out together. But the Eagles are a team that needs a running back. And there are a number of them. We just mentioned Minnesota's going to be one. The New York Giants, we constantly talk about. Tampa Bay is going to be one. And Murray's going to be a guy of interest, I think, for all of those teams, because he's the guy hitting free agency that's sort of like Benny Logan here. He's coming off his rookie contract. He's only 27 years old. He's only run the ball 500-plus times, so he's got tread on the tire. He's not beat up. And I think he's a guy who's going to get a lot of interest if he gets to free agency. And he had 12 touchdowns running the football last year. Only about 800 yards, 4 yards a carry. So he's not explosive, but he's a big guy with a nose for the end zone. And he would certainly be an improvement on this team. There's no question about that.
John McMullen on the NFL every day at this time here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Check us out online at 973ESPN.com and at JF McMullen on Twitter for all things NFL offseason here on the Sports Bash. Johnny Mac, tomorrow, same time, same place. This is the end.
Hey, thank you.